If you have been following my videos, you know that recently I've been playing a lot of games that are simple, light, and solo-friendly because due to the quarantine, I'm too tired to play complicated war games, and also to keep my friends safe, I don't play with human opponents these days. And somebody said, but why don't you play on a tabletop simulator or on Vassal? Well, because I don't want to live a lie, that's why. I play video games all the time, but if the game that I want to play is a tabletop game, then I want to play it on a tabletop game, rolling those dice and pushing that cardboard around. Also, why don't you play games on Zoom or Skype? Because I already work on Zoom or Skype. Doing more of that during my hobby time is not great. So that leaves me with, again, playing actual games by myself. And also leaves me with exploring a lot of folio games by Decision Games. In this video, I'll tell you about Acre, or as the designer's notes say, it's pronounced okay-er. What? So, the game with a mysterious name but a known historical topic. We are in the Third Crusade around the fortress of blank, Acre, that is being besieged by a line of crusaders. There is another line of crusaders here defending the rear guard, and there will be a long line of Muslim forces controlled by Saladin that will try to bring relief to the fortress. They will try to break that line of defenders. There is a possibility later for a sortie of units that are there. So that is a situation of trying to relieve a siege. It is a two-player game. Again, one player controlling the Crusaders, one player controlling Saladin and his forces, but you can play in multiplayer solo, which is how I played it, which is controlling both sides at the best of your possibilities. There's no hidden information. There are a lot of die rolls, a lot of uncertainty is going to happen. It's going to be playing a role, so you can definitely surprise yourself all the time, and you still have, again, interesting decisions when you switch side mentally. The game is based on the same system as the game Suff, which I reviewed, I believe, a couple of weeks ago, although, again, now time is hard to tell in my mind. So that also had the advantage that the game with a mysterious name here was based on the same system, so I only have to learn some of the unique rules, and some of the unique rules are also shared with that game, so hooray! Also, if you watch my other video, then you know how to play this one. Units are represented by cardboard units, and I do not clip corners because I don't have the kind of time, I don't have the kind of stamina. So we have printed on these units a combat factor, a movement factor, and if there are small numbers here on the side of the illustration, as you can see, many units do have those small numbers. Those are used for range combat. The big number is the range combat factor, and the small number is the range. So factor and actual range, how far they can shoot. As you can see, most units that have archery factors only shoot into adjacent hexes. Some units, or a lot of units, actually have a dot here. They represent light units, and that is very important. Saladin and his forces have those light units, and they really need them to try to use hit-and-run tactics. The game depicts that very well. You move in, you try to inflict some damage to disorganize them with archery, try to push them, and then defeat them with melee, which may or may not be successful. Then they're going to try to attack you, and you will probably retreat after combat, because if you are a light unit, you can do that. They let you do that. Actually, there's a special procedure for Saladin's forces when they are attacked by the opponent, and if they had the dot indicating light units, you can declare a special maneuver that, if successful, will get you to move a number of hexes away and will force the Crusaders to follow you. And that really is the best way to do anything against them, because they're just so much stronger. The Crusaders are tough, as they very well should be historically, and so really the only way to break the line is not with mindless charges, but with costly, painful charges, in the hope that you will get some of these maniacs to run after you, yelling and screaming, and before they know it, they're surrounded, and booyah, and that is when you destroy them. That's how you thin out their line. It is a game where inflicting losses on the opponent is extremely important. It pretty much determines victory or defeat. Depending on how much loss you inflict on the opponent, there is a level in which the army is demoralized. Some of you will remember the classic game Napoleon at Waterloo that used that idea. And then there is another level of losses taken that will disintegrate an army. You win by disintegrating the enemy's army. That always is the case. And then there are the victory conditions, such as Saladin's forces win by creating a path to the fortress. If you don't win, neither side wins until the end of the last turn, then you count victory points, which are again based on bloodletting pretty much, but also on other possible things such as sacking the enemy camp or destroying the trebuchet. The Saladin's forces will try to destroy the trebuchet that the Crusaders have around the fortress. The general idea, if you watch my video for Suff, again, is pretty much the same, and it's very simple, which is player 1 and then player 2. Player 1 will have their movement phase, in which units will move up to their full movement allowance. You probably know what that means and how that works. Oh yeah, of course, you also have leaders, I forgot. Leaders have movements, movement value, and also a modifier that they add to the combat of the unit they're stacked with. And so movement allowance is, well, you move, hello, and this map doesn't have a lot of terrain features, so that's about it. You move up to the full movement allowance, then there will be an archery phase in which units of both sides, active player and non-active player, get to fire. To fire, again, there is the range tells you how far you can fire, and then you roll a die for each unit that is firing. If you roll equal to or lower than your archery factor, you disorganize the opponent, which means you flip them to their other side, which has a lower value. Archery does not eliminate units, only softens up your opponent before, hopefully, you will get to eliminate them in combat. So after movement of player 1, archery for both players, so player 1 conducts combat, then player 1 reorganizes and rallies units to see if disorganized units get to be flipped back, if eliminated units get to be brought back, and you repeat like this with the second player, and so on and so forth. As for combat, when I show the combat table, you know how it's done. It's based on odds, so you divide all of the combat factors of the attackers by that of the defender. Find a column that corresponds to the ratio that you obtain there. Roll a die. Possibly modifiers will apply based on terrain, and then you simply apply the result, which are pretty much self-explanatory. An interesting element of this battle, this game in the system specifically, to represent the two-act drama that the historical battle was. When the Saladin's forces are demoralized, that is, when they receive 50, a loss of 50 victory points, then you, the Saladins, can declare strategic withdrawal. And you should, because then otherwise the disintegration factor is, as you can see, very close to demoralization. If you declare strategic withdrawal, then the factors change because demoralization goes to 70 and disintegration goes to 100. What the heck does that mean? It's really a pause in the game. It is, I guess, a soft reset, a soft reboot, which is you remove all of the Muslim forces still in play from the board. Everybody gets to be reorganized. If they were disorganized, you get to try to rally other units, and then the Muslim units make it back. So there is a second wave, and so that's a pretty unusual way of handling the flow of battle, which I have to admit, to me somehow devaluates the first part of the game. And yes, it's not that the Crusaders will get to teleport everywhere they want. It's not that it really erases it, but again, a soft reboot to me is different from a drama that gradually builds and creates a narrative arc throughout the entire game. Anyways, in general, this is how you play this game. The game with no name, or with a mysterious name. If you watch my video review for Suff and you don't have a lot of time to watch these conclusions, the short version is very similar to Suff, just a little less fun. Just if you had to choose between the two, go with Suff. Because that game had such a such a dynamic, evolving situation, as one side is trying to move towards an objective and the other side is harassing them, and so it's about trading space and blood for progression. It's just an evolving situation. Here what you have is a more of a frontal confrontation. The Crusaders really don't want to go anywhere. They want to stay there as the Saladin's light troops try to draw them in and then to surround them. But the situation is that one. There doesn't have that much dynamism. I like the system that is shared by the two games. I think it gives you that medieval flavor. You have troops that more or less work the way you expect them. That nice contrast again between a strong, heavy European troops and those light mobile units. Maybe here the Europeans have more range units, more range capability than I've seen in other games with a similar topic. But that's not a bad thing, because that means that both sides can be entertained, can be involved in the situation in every turn, because even the non-active player has some abilities to fire defensively during the active player's turn. So it's an interesting back and forth with therefore less downtime than if you're doing I go, you go full on. But I played the game solitaire, both sides, so that wasn't much of a concern. But still, actually, it was interesting. As I'm controlling the active player, I set up a certain action, but then my units are disrupted by the time they get to try to perform their melee, because they have been reduced or disorganized by the enemy, by the non-active player's range fire, which is resolved before melee. So the system is nice. I like it. It's simple. You could play this game if you were just a novice in wargaming, and if you are an experienced wargamer but maybe a little bit tired and you don't always want to play the heavy stuff. The system is a good option. Again, it's just that if I played it in different orders, I would have probably been happy with Acre, if that's how you pronounce it, who knows, and then even happier with Suff. It happened the other way around, and so this game just felt a little bit more bland, with just less flavor in it, because the situation is more static, because the Crusaders don't want to go anywhere, and they're going to be pulled out, but again, hold the line and then surrounded, but it's just a little less interesting. And as I hinted at early, the two-act drama in which you basically reset the situation almost is just not as interesting. And I've played games, when you play games about the Battle of the Bulge, it almost feels that way, because you may have, after the initial German attack, a situation where there are almost no allied units on the troop, and yet you don't reset. You go from where you are, the other defenders are coming. Resetting, or even let's call it a soft reset, a soft reboot like you have in several video games, is just not quite the same. It just makes one part feel prologue as opposed to the two sections part of a single cohesive experience. And I just found that a little less interesting. So you have all of the good stuff that you have in Suff, I would say at the lower level of engagement. It was an interesting situation to explore historically. As an historical war game, there's always a chance to learn more about history. It was just a little less fun to play than Suff, so if you had to choose between the two, I would recommend Suff. If you really love the topic, you want to play both, then play this one first, and Suff later. You'll be like, whoa, this system keeps getting better and better. Because there's nothing wrong with this game per se, but compared to one of its companion games, it's just a little weaker, it's just a little less engaging.